So one of the conversations surrounding Gotham Knights has been about the Traversal. Sorry about my voice, I have a cold, I'm still recovering, but I thought that it was appropriate that I made this video right now because fresh on my mind is at least almost a dozen hours of playing Batgirl and just running the open world cycles in terms of leveling her up, getting new gear, and so on and so forth. So this is the very best impression of my experience with her traversal system and combat and how it actually works within the game in Gotham Knights. Now, in my earlier review, when I talked about traversal in Gotham Knights, I said the system was functional. I gave it a 6 or a 7 out of 10, maybe even an 8 out of 10. And I weighed this game in the context of the game in itself. But there is an argument to be made. There are games out there like the Arkham games, there are games like Spider-Man games who make their superhero traversal really pristine. Everything about it is really cool. The web swinging in the Spider-Man games, they're a joy to actually engage in. You could just sit there and web swing forever. In the Arkham games, you can basically do your gliding, as much as you want. It's actually a really cool experience. The way the camera, the feel, the physics, the wind, the camera changes, and all those little dynamics really make the system very immersive. In the case of Gotham Knights, the system is kind of cut and dry. It doesn't really try to do too much to impress you, but there are impressive aspects of it, which I think if we were to weigh things and say, okay, if you were trying to come to this conversation and say, well, the Arkham games had better traversal than Gotham Knights, I would say, hold up. The answer is yes, but because when you actually break down the traversal, you got to break it down into all of the different Knights, and then you have to look at the Batcycle versus the Batmobile. Now, I'll just go ahead and spoil it for you. The Batmobile and the Batcycle, I did their analysis. The Batcycle is very, very slow, and I think the reason might be the fact that they wanted to maintain performance for their game. But when I did the calculation, a real-life motorbike runs at a specific speed. So I measured that against Gotham Knights bike and realized that the developers actually cut down the speed of the Gotham Knights Batcycle by half. This is how you know that they were trying to actually make room for performance in their game. It was literally like divided by 2. So somebody probably used the speed slider in their code and went, yeah, let's just reduce this thing by 50%. So that's how I came to the calculation. I did it on a rough sheet of paper if you care to see, but it was actually interesting to discover that. But when it comes to, say, superhero to superhero, apples to apples, or whatever it is, yes, Batman's traversal is actually pretty cool. The way the design and the way the developers from Rocksteady went ahead and did all of that really made a whole lot of sense. They had years to fine-tune it. By the time we got to Arkham Knight, you were able to basically land on drones, do all kinds of stuff. When we got to Gotham Knights, this was a different developer, but they did not go ahead and implement those really flashy aspects of traversal. Instead, they focused on their own game, which is why I said it's cut and dry. Sure, the Arkham system is better, but that of Gotham Knights, the way people have actually categorized it, and I'm going to give a subcategory in regard to Batgirl, is actually not bad. It actually works for the game that they tried to make. The Arkham games did not necessarily give you too many opportunities of doing a lot of open world stealth, unlike, say, Gotham Knights, which gives you multiple reiterations of stealth missions that are set up in different aspects, or you could take a mission and make it somewhat stealthy. So there's a lot of room for that conversation as to how each game functions that allows you to say a cut and dry system possibly is a realistic way of getting things just done compared to a much more flashy system. Now, this also will have to bring you into the conversation of stealth and combat, because traversal is one thing. Batman's gliding and Batgirl's gliding, at the end of the day, they don't necessarily feel too different unless you do the boost, the dive boost or the grapple boost. That's where you're really going to see the Arkham system shine. But in case of, Gotham Knights, it's just very simple. It's like she has like a basic suit, right? So, okay, we'll give Arkham that one by a margin of 10 to, 5. That's basically what it is. Arkham is 10, Gotham Knights is kind of 5 in that level or in that layer. But then when it comes down to say the way you do your takedowns in regard to Batgirl, like your stealth takedowns and so on and so forth, this is where Gotham Knights starts to shine, because the way they've designed their levels, whenever you have these enemies spawn in their little camps or hideout or maybe small areas within the open world, you can really leverage Batgirl's abilities, or in terms of the gliding, to be able to get into combat back and forth. Her aerial attacks, whether it be stealth attacks or aerial takedown attacks, are just straight up overpowered. Those things can literally help you almost select a character, an enemy NPC, and take them out in a systematic and calculated way. However, the challenge though is whenever you go into that mode where you're panning over your enemy NPCs, the camera control is very stiff. And I think that is something that has to do with, say, possibly they were limited, or maybe they needed to go back and smooth out their camera movement so that you could actually pinpoint specific enemy NPCs. But I'm not going to also go ahead and just blow smoke. Arkham as well too, whenever you wanted to select a specific NPC, sometimes you were coming in for a dive where you were going to attack an enemy NPC in a crowd. That also was a little tricky because you were moving very fast. So the speed of that one kind of put you in a position where you didn't just have all the time in the world to sit there and just calculate and say, yeah, I want that goon over there and I want the other goon with the gun. You really had to make a decision fast, or you had to maybe cancel out of that, glide attack that you were going in with. So by and large, when you think about it, yes, you can say there is something to be said that improvement needed to be made in, say, Batgirl's, glide ability. But at the end of the day, it really does work and is cohesive within the game. Now, to judge it within the aspect of its game and remove the Arkham comparison from the conversation, I can say that Batgirl's gliding ability as compared to, say, the others in regard to, say, how it's functioning and everything else is a very solid system. If this game was a Batgirl game, we're probably going to be rating this glide ability around an 8 out of 10 because everything that she needs to do, all of her abilities, her takedowns, all the things that really do gel with her movement and her combat systems are actually very well done. I remember the developer saying that they actually started working on Batgirl first, and I think that's why she actually got a lot of the love in this particular area. Now, when I think about having used Robin, who's probably one of the most played in my playlist so far, I can tell you that he has deficiencies when it comes into his teleportation. And then even using Red Hood, even though I love his Traversal, it's the one I love the most, where he's using a Mystic Leap, you also have the problem of being able to turn and control the character in the air while also controlling your camera so that you can make selections. So his is actually the worst when it comes to engaging combat with it, whereas Batgirl's is the best. But here's a crazy thing. You probably wonder why I didn't talk about Nightwing. Nightwing's is actually just as good as Batgirl's, if not slightly fine-tuned. But believe it or not, from a game design and a game mechanic perspective, both gliding systems are actually kind of the same. Let me explain. Look how both of them move in the air. The two major differences with the glider is that the animation, number one, or the character position is different. And number two, with Nightwing, you can control the glider because they wanted to give you a little bit of momentum control with lift and, fall. And so that's basically the two things. But if you think about it, both of them kind of just glide and you can circle around. You have much more fluid controls and you can pretty much select your characters kind of on the go to allow for a dynamic, change in the way the combat goes. And it doesn't really give you too much room, and the camera control is smooth. It's there. It could use improvement, but they kind of play very similarly. So I started out a conversation with Batgirl and I ended out with Nightwing because this is something that both characters are capable of doing. Also, when we look at, say, even Robin, yes, Robin is kind of weird. Red Hood being, say, the worst to gel into combat, but my favorite from a game design, game mechanic perspective, even a style perspective. I know some people are looking at it and they quickly throw out some, funny comments about it. I think it's a really good mechanic. It's very clever. When you want to make 4 different knights and you want to kind of like mix it up, I thought it was pretty cool that they came up with something that was just way out there for him. But that's just my perception. But Robin's, the problem is whenever you're really high, because of the way the teleportation works, that verticality is what kind of does you in, and it doesn't really make for a flow into combat. So you kind of have to sit there and almost select your target and then manage your height by maybe appearing and disappearing to kind of like level the height that you're trying to drop into combat from, which kind of breaks that immersion. And I think that's probably why it's not really the best when it comes to that. It is a functional system. It makes things different, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't gel like, say, Batgirls and Nightwings would gel into a combat system. So in regard to that, I think what we are seeing here with Gotham Knights is my very first set of criticisms where I said, I really wish the developers would have focused on one character at a time. Possibly it would have made sense if they actually went ahead to delve in deep with one character, have that character just interact with the other characters, and then maybe made these other characters kind of DLC by the end game. But again, you have fan service to do. So throwing all 4 characters in there and using your team to develop a system for all of them, that's where I appreciate Gotham Knights. And for those, who may still think, but you're still covering this game is not really that good of a game. There's no game that has actually been made like this, ladies and gentlemen. You have to understand that when you start to delve into the deep mechanics of this game and compare it with other games that you might want to throw out there, this game continues to show you that it's actually way more ambitious than, most of them. Sure, it copies some things from other games, but many of these games did not do something as crazy, which I think is crazy, as throwing 4 characters into the mix. Imagine a Spider-Man game with Peter, Miles, Gwen, and maybe throwing another Spider-Man from another universe at the same time. All of them have got to fight differently. They've got to have their own different abilities, gadgets, so on and so forth. And at the same time, you have to do this in a way where people can actually play co-op. Even Sony is not yet mad enough to dare something like that yet. Warner Bros. Games Montreal comes out the door with their very first game, and this is the iteration. I think I pay respect to this because it's actually pretty cool. So when it comes to Traversal, I can understand people having their issues with, all of the different nuances and iterations. But again, here in our, little bubble, we have to look at a whole bunch of different things. I've seen many people say, the Fortnite glider and Nightwing and so on and so forth. But many of them don't consider that even within the canon, he's used different kinds of gliders. Now, I don't know if he's used this specific kind of glider, but I do know that you guys here in the community, you told me the particular comic and the edition that, he used the glider, and I went and bought it. And I showed you guys that, oh, this is actually a thing where he's using a glider. And I think a lot of people don't really understand who have said, why don't you just give everybody a glide ability, is the fact that if you did give everybody a glide ability, you'd have to account for all of their skins. Batgirl skins, once you basically unlock your heroic ability, basically all have a cape of some sort. Either they have like a kind of a, streamlined cape that comes in with the suit, or maybe something that's like an auto-generated, I would say cape. You could do the same for the others, but I think if you think about, just some of the nuances and so on and so forth, it gives all the other characters a lot more variety in their skins, especially a character like Red Hood. I have never seen Red Hood in a cape in any representation. Now, I may be wrong, but I have never seen Jason Todd use a cape before. So I think it makes a lot of sense that the developers were probably trying to break from the mold, challenge themselves, give Batgirl the closest representation that they could to Batman and all of his nuances, and then give the other knights something different to do. Now, that harmed them because all of the systems did not get as polished as the Batgirl and Nightwing system in terms of how it gels with combat. But at the end of the day, they provided something that was actually pretty good. So when you look at Gotham Knights, all of these people that are talking about, oh, the game is just, mediocre and blah, blah, blah. I saw someone that had never played the game and said the game was mediocre. They said, why are you defending the game that is just mediocre? And I was like, but you haven't even played the game. You've been listening to a lot of these people on YouTube that have been lying to you. Pick the game up for yourself. And then if the game is mid to you, then that's your own, perspective. Don't let anybody tell you what to do. Or tell you what to think. You pick the game up and tell yourself, this is what the game is to me. But when you think about it, I think this is one of those things that Rocksteady talked about, or Stephen Hill talked about, when he was giving a presentation to DICE developers. He said, whenever you make a system in your game, you want to make sure that all your systems are at least at a 90 to 100% in terms of quality. Anyone that's not firing at at that perspective, you kind of have to cut that system out. Now, the only way you can actually learn is if you were to make a small game and kind of start from there. But Warner Bros. Montreal started out with a big game with 4 characters. So it's kind of really weird because there's almost no way that maybe they should have gone ahead and cut out the teleportation, cut out the glider, cut out the mystic leap, and just give everybody some kind of a glide ability, and then focused on how the glide ability works across all 4 characters and make it the best glide ability ever. And so I think this is a learning process for them, and somewhere that they can learn to say, you know what, maybe less mechanics is probably going to be more, because that way we're able to make sure everything is fine-tuned to the best of our ability. Now, I have to also say at the back of this, when it comes to Red Hood's and, gameplay in terms of using all of his combat and everything, I still need to go ahead and dig in deeper, because a lot of times whenever you see these systems show up, there might be a deficiency on the player side. Because I haven't necessarily used it too much, I realized that it was a little kind of, hard to control. It may be that there might be some compensation or some getting used to that I need to, pretty much figure out before I come back with a final judgment on saying that Red Hood is actually, you know, the worst of them all. From my preliminary and in-depth look at Batgirl, you know, basically in depth, and then preliminary in terms of Red Hood, and then the others I've played extensively, I can say that Batgirl's, you know, traversal is good. I can say that, you know, Nightwing's traversal is good. Robin's breaks the immersion, and Red Hood is very hard to, you know, pretty much control. But does it mean that all of the traversal systems in the game are bad, like people are going ahead to claim? Man, y'all sometimes are really the most dramatic people in gaming. They're DC fans. I hope that you guys one day maybe can, you know, I don't know, maybe some of you can actually get into studios and make a game, man. You know, maybe get a computer, download a, you know, a game engine and knock it out. We see a lot of people in our, you know, space are trying to do it. So maybe that might give you a little bit of appreciation, or maybe give you something to look at, especially from my perspective, because my perspective, I'm not just looking at it from the player perspective. I'm looking at it from the developer side as well. I'm not going to apologize for that. Screw that. I spent 2 years and sleepless nights learning how to actually, you know, figure out how games are made. So why should I be apologetic about that? And especially for those who say, I don't care how a game is made, that's your business. But if you're going to, you know, pretty much go tit for tat with me, then you're going to have to pretty much deal with that, because that's just something that I considered important. And I think every gamer who wants to chime in and talk about how mechanics could have been better ought to at least know what mechanics are, you know, about in terms of the stress that goes into designing them, and so on and so forth. But this video is longer than I wanted it to go, so I'm going to get out of your hair. Thanks so much for watching the video. I appreciate you guys' time and audience. Thanks for, you know, dealing with my voice for all this while. Hopefully I get better, and we'll talk pretty soon in another one. Peace out.